1-week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes. Welcome back to Searching for a Ceiling, presented by 1 Week Season and a sharp football analysis. After a night of spooks and frights, we are back to get you through this scary DFS slate for week 9. So without further ado, the great Rich Hribar. How we doing this week, dude?
What's happening, brother? It's November too now.
Oh,
it's crazy to say that, man. It's halfway through the NFL season this week. It goes quick.
Man, it sure does, dude. Talking about all the close calls we've had, how was your week 8?
It could have been better, man. I overinvested in the Dolphins, man, for sure.
Oh, that'll get you. That'll get you.
Yeah, that came back to run me. I was too bullish on the return of Tua to relift all the spirits of everyone in that offense outside of Devin Achane, and we didn't get there. But
yeah, unfortunately,
and one Bo Nix team do well to win some money back, but it could have been better.
Oh man, well, I'm sorry to hear. Hopefully, we can resurrect. I don't know, fight through those demons. We'll say. Actually, I had yet another freaking sweat last week, man. I was in 4th in the SPY, so that's 100K up top on DraftKings, and I had Swift and Broncos D running. Broncos D got scored on with 18 seconds remaining to drop me 3 points there. I missed out on 3 points from the stat correction from Cedric Tillman, from 100 yards and 2 tutties to 99 yards and 2 tutties. And then I had Swift running, and he gets no goal line exposure.
Yeah,
on the final
super bummer. Swift was trying to bring me back in a few spots too,
True.
and then you got Roschon, and then we got offensive lineman on another.
Yeah,
one.
what offensive lineman fumbled? Anyway, that's an interesting discussion I want to touch on real quick before we jump into this slate. Going into the afternoon, I noticed that I was duped twice in the SPY. And to use all the salary, that was Denver Broncos defense, and that was Kareem Hunt. So realizing that I was duped twice, the old late swap-a-rooney came into play last week. So I swapped off of Kareem Hunt onto DeAndre Swift, and I was sweating bullets at the beginning of the slate because Kareem Hunt scored on the first Chiefs drive. I was like, oh, great, this is how this is going to go. But then Swift breaks free for that 56-yard touchdown and almost doubles up on Kareem Hunt's score. So these are the kind of things that we're looking for to remain profitable in this game, is realizing when a pivot makes sense, when these late swap opportunities arise. That one late swap won me an extra 3,500. I ended up in 7th for 4K. So things break my way a little bit differently. We're sitting on 100K bink, but I think I played it as best as I could, and that's all we can do, right? So now, yet another 4 out of the last 5 weeks, we've had legitimate sweats. Let's freaking bink one, man. Let's bink one. So without further ado, let's get into this slate, and we've got an interesting mix. We don't have a ton of afternoon games, but there are some games throughout the slate that are carrying some pretty significant game totals. And the first one I want to talk about is the Cowboys and Falcons. So how are you seeing that spot this week?
Yeah, this is early kick, highest total. There are paths of failure here, as we've seen, for both these teams, right? But, you saw from an upside outcome, it does exist. This Cowboys offense has not looked very good for multiple reasons. I mean, I bet the Cowboys season under win total coming into the year. I'm feeling pretty good about where that sits right now. And my primary concern was just outside of CeeDee Lamb, they didn't have a reliable contributor in the passing game. And we've kind of seen some unevenness between, is it Jalen Tolbert going to consistently be good? He's living that Brandon Cooks life right now, and Jake Ferguson making that step forward. And then this coaching staff is doing them no favors. I mean, you come out on Sunday night out of the bye on the first drive of the game on the road in San Francisco, and your first third down play call is a draw to Hunter Luepke. What are we practicing? What are we doing? But also I will say, if you're looking for the Cowboys to potentially have this spot to be better, I do think that exists as well. They have faced the Browns, the Steelers, the last 3 games, Steelers, Lions, 49ers, 3 of the better pass rush teams in the NFL. This week, they're getting a Falcons team that's 29th in the NFL in pressure rate. They're last in the NFL in sack rate. They have allowed a league high completion rate, 22nd in touchdown rate. They've allowed 3 of their past 4 games a QB1 score. They've allowed multiple passing touchdowns in 4 straight games. They play a ton of zone. They're a very passive defense, which I think the Cowboys will gladly take right now, given what their recent schedule has been defensively. So there's a path here, I think, if you want to go beyond just like the clean mini of Bijan plus CeeDee Lamb, to maybe incorporate Dak into like one of these stacks and maybe have a game where Dak is forced to throw, because this team can't run the football. They are dead last. They don't have any running back run of 20 or more yards this season. They're the only team in the NFL. They're also dead last in running back runs of 10 or more yards. So, like, they have to throw the football. If the Cowboys are going to get there in any capacity, it's got to be through Dak Prescott.
It has to be. And another interesting nugget about this Falcons defense, as you mentioned, they want to force teams to drive the field. They're playing a lot of deep safety stuff. But when they're allowing red zone opportunities, I mean, last season they were ranked 4th in red zone touchdown rate at 45.28%. This year, that's up to 57.69%. So that's also why they are 31st in the league in average time of possession this season, because they're forcing teams to kind of march the field. But this season, they're not hunkering down as much in the red zone. So if you're allowing a team like the Cowboys to march the field, now the levee could break here, in my opinion, for this Dallas Cowboys team. And this is kind of like the final litmus test. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with Mike McDaniel. This is kind of like final litmus test for me for this Cowboys team. It's a very similar setup to how they handled last season, where they kind of started off slow through the first half of the season. And then the second half of the season, like CeeDee Lamb was far and away the wide receiver 1. Dak Prescott was in the top 3 in quarterbacks. So to me, is this a spot where the Cowboys finally get it going? And if so, it's probably coming through pass game volume, like you talked about. So I love Dak Prescott doubles, Dak with CeeDee and one of Jake Ferguson and Jalen Tolbert. Even in that discussion, Jalen Tolbert is still operating in a deeper A-dot role. And we just talked about the Falcons defense is trying to force things over the short to intermediate areas to force teams to march the field. They also play a lot of cover 4 and a lot of cover 6. And a lot is relative. So like the combined cover 4 and cover 6 rates of the Falcons is about 27%. That's heavy for the current state of the NFL game. And against those coverages, it's actually Jake Ferguson that stands out on paper to me. So a nice little clean team stack of Dak, CeeDee, and Jake Ferguson makes a lot of sense. And then the Cowboys can't stop the run, man. So It's really easy to bring it back with Bijan. I'm still fighting this like internal battle, and I wonder how your opinion on the matter is. We've continued to and I say we, like the fantasy community, the industry continues to view Bijan as like this borderline workhorse guy, but he's not really that.
No.
So how do you see Bijan here specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him get incorporated in the passing game a lot more recently. I mean, over this 3-game kind of run. And the Falcons are another team. They opened up with a harder defensive schedule to open the year as well. I mean, they faced the Steelers, the Chiefs in the part of their first 3 games. And it's like, all right, so get a little run. They had the weird game on Thursday Night Football where they were kind of chasing points against the Bucs, where they dropped back, 58 times in that game. But we've seen now them kind of mix it up and be a little bit more run heavy in 2 of the past 3 games. Some of that's game script, but we've also seen Bijan Robinson get a 16% target share when weeks 1 through 5 it was 11.4%, and that's a significant add. Those few catches, because he's an explosive player in the passing game as well. And the Cowboys aren't going to get Micah Parsons back. It doesn't look like in this game either, so their pass rush is probably going to still be down this week. But the Falcons are a tricky team from like a bring back stance in this game, because clearly we have Bijan Robinson, but the rest of the guys I think are a little bit tougher to diagnose. Like if you're going to try to build out this game on. I mean, I love the growth for Drake London that we've seen, right? Playing power slot, but he's got one tournament worthy game this season. He's kind of doing what Michael Pittman did last year.
Exactly. That's a good comp. Yeah.
He's getting the catches and he's getting some touchdowns, but he's got one game over 74 yards. And the game that he got there from a tournament perspective was the game that had 58 dropbacks. So Are we going to get that in this game? I think it's tough at his price, right? It was always the thing with Pittman, because Pittman was always priced in that same range. Like,
Yeah.
he'd always be like around like that 7K, like high sixes to low sevens. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't really love the pay this price for this player. And then as much as Kyle Pitts, we've seen the usage change a little bit. And we were wondering how Zach Robinson and the marriage of Zach Robinson and Kyle Pitts was going to fit, because in this offensive system, they haven't had a player like Kyle Pitts. This is an offense that wants to play their tight end in line. And Pitts is playing more in line for the first time in his career. He didn't do a lot of this at Florida and didn't do a lot in the Arthur Smith era. And he was running a lot of stuff the opening month of the season, like the Tyler Higbee stuff, right? Where you're running things to the flat and you're running a lot of out routes. And we've seen him now get more vertical routes the past month. The problem, though, what we still have with Kyle Pitts is the earning targets in this offense. He only has one game with 20% or more of the team targets, compared to London is 7, Darnell Mooney is 5, even Ray McLeod is 2. So we like that the usage has started to change and the coaching staff started to realize they can get him some vertical plays. He does have 4 catches of over 20 or more yards in the past 4 weeks, which is significant for at a low bar position like tight end. But he's not getting the overall passing volume that we still want to see. But it's nice to see him at least have a pulse after the opening month of the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion too, I think, because he played only 48% of the offensive snaps last week. You mentioned the fact that this is an 11 personnel heavy offense. Well, they're not going away from like Charlie Warner as the primary blocking tight end.
Yeah.
So if they're not playing a lot of 12 and they want Charlie Warner on the field for his blocking acumen, that comes at the direct expense of Kyle Pitts. So he's like another interesting nut for me to crack. I can't really get a read on him. I just keep saying like his opportunity does not justify the ownership.
He has to have multiple touchdowns at his price.
Yeah. And last week he kind of was gifted one, right? That probably shouldn't have been.
Also, like, how is this still happening? You saw it again last night with Malachi Corley. Like, guys, we've seen enough players like get Leon Ledded, like,
hold the football
DK
through the end
Metcalf
zone.
a couple years ago had one. It's like, guys, is it also just go spike the ball? Just spike it. Like, we don't need to drop the football.
Yeah. The last interesting piece I think from this game is the fact that like Deron Bland and Trevon Diggs have not practiced this week. That's both starting corners for the Cowboys. Does that give a little bit more interest to a guy like from a deep threat from this offense like Darnell Mooney?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. Like I said, the Falcons are just like a tougher team to diagnose. Like, because even from Kirk Cousins, like, and Mooney coincide, like, if we could build the whole plane out of their box scores against the Buccaneers, like, those guys would be incredible. But outside of the Buccaneers games, neither Cousins or Mooney have done much.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. We'll leave it at that.
But yeah, I mean, I have no problem with it. Like, if you're going with it, like, just because the injuries the Cowboys have defensively. My one concern is that they just run the football.
Yeah, and that brings in Tyler Algier as well. So it's like, damn it. I'm with you. There are interesting ways, I think, and we'll cover this probably later on in the week from 1 week season on the Slate podcast. There are very interesting ways to tell the story that opens up these guys through roster construction.
Yeah, I mean, if this game's going to get there, though, in any capacity, I think it goes back to our initial point that you and I both believe if the game gets there, it's going to be because the Cowboys passing game got there.
Yep, 100%. Love that. Let's jump on over to an afternoon game that is probably, I think, going to go a little bit overlooked relative to its chances of developing into something that we kind of had to have a piece of, and that's the Lions and the Packers. You'll notice today we're kind of focusing on like the game environment aspect because there's a lot of teams with high team totals. But again, we kind of want to be operating under this game environment focus. So how are you seeing the Lions and the Packers in this afternoon portion of the slate?
The Lion side's a lot clearer right now because we wait on, whether or not Jordan Love's going to play, whether or not this is gamesmanship, because they did the thing with Jordan Love a couple weeks into the season where they acted like he was going to play. The Packers are notoriously a cautious organization with injured players. They are on bye next week. I understand this is a big game. So maybe they obviously would prefer to have Jordan Love available, but the Lions side's a little more easier to diagnose this season. In this game, especially in the play action pass game. I mean, nobody uses play action pass more than Jared Goff this season. He under play action, he's leads the NFL in yards per pass attempt. He leads the NFL in completion rate. And the Packers have been a very volatile defense with and without defending the play action pass. Against play action, they are 22nd in completion rate allowed, 19th in yards per pass attempt allowed. They allow a 5.9% touchdown rate. And when teams have not used play action, they allow only a 60% completion rate, 6.8 yards per pass attempt, a 4.2% touchdown rate. They've been really susceptible to the play action pass this season. So, I mean, I think this is a game still where you look at the Lions, their offense, I expect them to kind of do what they've been doing kind of all season long and kind of stay on script here. And a lot of people will probably say, this is Jared Goff's first outdoor game. Jared Goff's outdoor splits kind of aren't really a thing. He has like some precipitation splits that are a thing. If you go back to like the Pep Hamilton days of dumping water bottles on his hands at his pro day. But I mean, they scored 34 points in Green Bay last year. Like, it's not act like just putting them outside. They probably should have went to the Super Bowl playing outdoors in San Francisco last year. Like, let's not act like just being outdoors like makes this a bad offense and makes Jared Goff turn into a pumpkin.
Jared Goff is, he's more of a pressure thing than it is indoor-outdoor thing.
And that hasn't even been a thing this year. Like, Jesus, he's been awesome he's actually second in the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure this year and first in completion rate. This offense to me is just playing the best in football. And it's hard for me now the problem is the Lions are started to do this whack-a-mole thing where like, they're just like letting all the dudes play. If you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, he only has 2 games he has 1 game where he's cleared 8 targets. That's it. Like, and he's a guy at his price and the way he's utilized, like you need those Amon-Ra 14 target games, those 16 target games, and they could pop up at any time, but he hasn't had those tournament worthy scores because they're now giving Khalif Raymond some targets. They're in the red zone. They're throwing to Brock Wright. They're running like they're doing what the Chiefs were doing. Remember the Chiefs started this a couple years ago. It's like you get inside the 10 and they're doing ring around the Rosie, or they're running the jet sweep to McCole Hardman, or they're running a shovel pass to Noah Gray. Like
Dave Montgomery passing touchdown to
yes,
Sam
that's
Laporta.
what the Lions are doing now. And it's become a little bit frustrating from that stance because we used to know with the Lions, hey, Amon-Ra, 30% of the targets, 12 plus targets are in the bag. Those haven't been as bankable. The one interesting piece I think about this game from a tournament perspective is that in the first game without Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta was kind of being back in terms of target share. 34% target share last week with no Jameson Williams. They didn't have to throw a lot. And the Packers have been one of these teams we've kind of highlighted with tight end play. So could Laporta be back on the menu this week? But it's very tricky from the Lions just because they're spreading the ball around. But I do think Goff is going to be successful.
Any interest in Tim Patrick, who saw a 77% snap rate last week?
He's playing the most route. He's running the most routes with Jameson Williams off the field, but Khalif Raymond's out targeting him per route. So it's kind of like it's all the dudes are playing.
Yeah, all the dudes. What about the Packers side? I think Jordan Love's going to have to play this week, right? The groin injury probably makes him less mobile as far as being able to evade pressure in the pocket. So that could open up some things for this Detroit Lions defense. Although, I mean, they haven't been getting pressure, particularly without Aiden Hutchinson. So if Love is forced to be this more statuesque type wide receiver or quarterback, we know the Lions are leading the league in man coverage rate. So how are you seeing these pass catchers on the Packers side?
Yeah, I saw anytime you see like the heavy man coverage stuff, it always is more of a signal for Romeo Doubs. And I think we were going to get there last week in the first half of that game, against the Jaguars. I think he had 60 yards at halftime of that game. And then obviously Love doesn't come back in the game and we can't get there the rest of the way. But typically when we see a lot of man coverage, it's typically Romeo Doubs. Also, Romeo Doubs is the guy we know that just is on the field. Anyways, he's like a little bit more of like the extension. I used to call him Green Bay Gabe Davis because, how he kind of gets targeted and how he lives.
He's Green Bay Allen Lazard.
He's better than Gabe Davis, though. I will say that on a per target basis. And, you can always play Jaden Reed, but Jaden Reed is another guy that is, I think he's perpetually overpriced in DFS. Obviously, he can get you the tournament worthy scores. But his man coverage splits are not nearly as good. He only has 9.5% of the team targets with Jordan Love in the game against man coverage, less than a yard per route run. Obviously, he can create a big play at any point. And when we say a team, we always do have to do the caveat too, is that when we say teams are running a lot of man coverage, they're running a lot of man coverage in context of the NFL, but like the Lions are still playing more zone coverage than man coverage.
Yeah.
That's
It's
one
not
thing
Wink
we always have to
Martindale.
say.
Yeah.
We always have to add that caveat to it. But we did see a little bit of a shift last week where Christian Watson was ahead of Dontavian Wicks. I mean, I don't know if that's something that's going to be static. It's kind of gone back and forth a little bit this year. But I am Romeo Dobbs, I think. Where are you?
I think, those, you broke it down pretty much as I'm seeing it. The one caveat I'll make is kind of your final point in that Christian Watson finally separated as far as snap rate and route participation goes from Dontavian Wicks. Now, we know Christian Watson entered the season a little bit banged up, and then he obviously picked up that ankle injury in week 4, missed week 5, was brought along relatively slowly over the last 3 weeks or the 2 weeks following his missed game. And then he saw 74% snap rate, and he was in a route at a high clip last week. And one of the knocks on him this season has been like he's kind of sharing a role with Dontavian Wicks.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have 4 wide receivers that can be wide receiver 2s on pretty much any team in the league, right? But that was not the case last week. Still, like it was a 74% snap share. It was a mid-80s route participation rate. So it wasn't like these numbers are blowing us away, but he is perpetually been a man beater. He is a guy that we can look for splash play upside against a team that is not generating pressure. So if Jordan Love plays, I kind of think I want to take some shots on Christian Watson here. Yeah. It's really, really hard. Like, do I like working through, do you include that in a skinny? Do you include that in a game stack? I would prefer a game stack, but I think you can skinny it up. I think you can play something like a Christian Watson, Sam Laporta. I think you can play something like a Christian Watson and Jahmyr Gibbs. We didn't even talk about either backfield, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are very interesting in this spot as well. While we can't ever expect them to be like in these competitive type games,
still frustrating, man,
in more than 50%, but
because Gibbs, I contend, would be the best fantasy running back in football if it wasn't for David Montgomery.
I agree. He was drafted as such this offseason in best ball. But then that needle in the side of David Montgomery is still there, man. Yeah. And I don't know. This is a very interesting discussion because
I don't know.
This is a borderline must-win game for the Packers. They go to their bye. So like, is that, hey, go out there and you'll have a week and a half to rest your groin after? Or is that like, hey, we need you to have 2.5 weeks to rest? I don't know. I really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect them to view this game as
we'll probably see practice reports, right? Like, I mean, who knows? Because when we knew weeks 2 and 3, we felt really confident he wasn't going to play, and they still acted like he was going to play both those weeks. Yeah. So I don't know, because that happened earlier in the season. I don't know how to handle this week.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Matt LaFleur and Sean McVay have kind of messed with the media a little bit in their pressers about injuries. Like
I've hated it this year. I feel like we've taken a step back this year because it felt like we were getting like more honesty and clarity on NFL injury reports for a couple of years, and this year feels like we're just back to like everyone's trying to lie. Like the Jaguars already today announced that both Brian Thomas Jr. and ETN will be game time decisions, and they play in the afternoon. It's like what, like, come on, guys.
Thanks,
like,
guys. Yeah, thanks. I mean, Sean McVay did it like 3 weeks ago with Jordan Whittington. Is like,
yes,
his response was like, nobody asked me about him. Oh, cool, man. That's perfect. Oh God. Anyway, we digress. Now I want to throw it to you. I brought up 2 games that are, I think, key aspects of this slate. What game are you singling out as a potential like had to have it spot?
I mean, I'll just talk about a couple. Let's get some gross games mixed in.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna snack in. I definitely want to talk about the Saints Panthers game.
Okay.
Just the grossest thing that anyone probably ever said out loud.
Yeah, let's go there first, man. Let's do it.
But we're getting Derek Carr back. The Saints got Cesar Ruiz back, which was significant for Alvin Kamara and his efficiency. With Ruiz on the field this season, Kamara has 5 yards per carry, an explosive run on 14% of his runs. He's only has a 16% stuff rate. He has 50 carries with Ruiz off the field, 3.1 yards per carry, only one explosive run and a stuff rate of 22%. We're obviously getting him in a pretty great spot against this Carolina defense, who did not allow chalk Javonte Williams to get there last week. It's funny how that we got there with Javonte Williams being so heavily owned at the end of the day. They still did allow 60 yards and a touchdown on 9 touches to Jaleel McLaughlin, though, in that game. I think that we're going to see a lot of Alvin Kamara and a lot of Chris Olave in this game. And don't forget about the impact that Rashid Shaheed's loss has had on Alvin Kamara in the passing game. He now has run 70 routes, 67 on the dot, with Shaheed off the field this season. So it's basically like 2 full games worth of like wide receiver routes with Shaheed off the field. He's been targeted on 34% of those routes. So Shaheed's absence is big for Kamara in the receiving game as well. And then we saw with Shaheed being out last week, Olave's first game without Shaheed had a season high 36.8% target share. So a lot of things are going to run through there. Obviously, those are guys gamers are going to get to. Then we have a couple cheapies that I think are flying like maybe under the radar. We have Mason Tipton now. That's probably going to be on the field for probably a full-time player this week. And then if Adam Thielen is out, we're going back to the ghost of Jalen Coker, who I tried to make a thing 2 weeks ago with Deontay Johnson on the field. And now that Deontay Johnson's off the field, he leads the Carolina Panthers in yards per route run. He has a touchdown or a first down on 74% of his targets this season. That by far leads the team. And if we don't get Adam Thielen back, why it's significant is because he played 75% of snaps in the slot last week. And that's where the Saints are getting hammered. 28th in catches allowed per game to slot receivers, 29th in yards per target allowed to slot receivers. So a couple cheapies in there. So if you're doing like a car double, especially on DraftKings, you can do something. I think obviously the clear double is just you play Kamara and Olave with Carr, but you can probably incorporate Mason Tipton into that and just try to luck box and do a touchdown here against all the single high stuff that the Carolina Panthers run. So, yeah, there's a couple cheapies in there. This game has a couple interesting ways to get there. That's probably the only Panther I'll entertain is Coker, but you got another one for me?
I think so. Well,
okay. What about Taysom Hill, too?
Yes, and Taysom Hill is here as well. Taysom Hill is, this is the first game since, week 2, where Derek Carr, Chris Olave, and Taysom Hill have been on the field. I think that's accurate. Taysom Hill missed.
I think the Falcons game, right? They had those guys
in week 4. You're talking about?
Yeah.
Taysom played only 20% of the snaps and he got hurt after scoring.
That was the one he got hurt. He had 2 touchdowns, I think, in the first half, right?
Yeah, in the first quarter, and then he got hurt. Yeah,
that's when he had the rib injury.
Yep. Yeah, so it's very interesting to me. I'm playing around with on the Saints side either Alvin Kamara or Taysom Hill on every roster. I'm legitimately playing around with that right now.
Okay.
Because like you talked about. Yeah, like you talked about, is like Alvin Kamara's pass game usage is very in line with we just got T. Higgins doubtful, so that changes some things as well.
They play on Thursday next week.
Yeah, exactly. We've had a multiple of those situations as pop up this year. But back to Alvin Kamara, I mean, we've been talking about the fact that Devon Achane, just to switch gears, not really switch gears, but kind of illustrate something here.
Yeah.
Devon Achane, in target totals in Tua healthy games, or Tua starts, we'll say, because he didn't finish week 2, 7, 7, and 8 targets, right? So not only that, his pass game production in those 3 games was equivalent to roughly the wide receiver 8 this season. So you're effectively playing Devon Achane, getting the wide receiver 8 priced at $6,700 that also is expected to get 10 to 12 carries. Alvin Kamara, his recent production through the air. Look at his target totals over the last, since week 5, we'll say. Let me pull it up here. His target totals since week 4, 9 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets, 7 targets, 11 targets. So you're effectively getting the volume of a wide receiver 1 with the upside for 20 plus carries. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of that is, once Kendre Miller came back 2 weeks ago, we saw Alvin Kamara's 2 of his 3 lowest snap rate games came when Kendre Miller returned. That was 57%, 55% snap rates. Kendre Miller now popped another hamstring and is looking like he is going to be out this week. So without Kendre Miller, between weeks 2 and 6, Alvin Kamara's snap rates were 63%, 86%, 82%, 89%, 74%. So this is the potential for Kamara to return to like a workhorse usage role. Jamal Williams is also banged up. He was limited on Wednesday and Thursday. So yeah, this is like a spot where it's like, I want to see what I can do to get Alvin Kamara in the roster. And then I was started thinking like, how does Alvin Kamara fail against the Panthers? He's getting poached on touchdowns. And who is likeliest to get poached on those touchdowns or poach him on those touchdowns? That's where Taysom Hill came in. So it's like, if Taysom has one of his like out of nowhere 3 touchdown games, obviously Alvin Kamara has very few paths to GPP relevance at his price, and Taysom Hill's only 3,800. So that's where this idea of either Alvin Kamara or Taysom Hill came in. And then on the other side, I kind of hope we get Thielen back, man. I really do. Because look at their roster. They have a second-year wide receiver in Jonathan Mingo that has still not mastered a full route tree. The only time he's on the field, he's seeing like schemed usage, and he's not really running like NFL routes. They have Jalen Coker, who's an undrafted free agent slot-only type rookie. They have Xavier Legette, who, while his per-touch upside is tantalizing, he has not mastered a full route tree yet. They are not running him in this structure of this offense in this like robust route tree type role. He has very defined role in this offense. And then they have David Moore, who is a veteran journeyman, like special teams contributor, who played the most snaps of this wide receiver core last week. So it's like the most complete wide receiver, or even pass catcher, if you want to include the tight ends. It's like their tight end room, man. Like who do they have? They have Tommy Tremble. They have Jatavian Sanders, a rookie. They have Ian Thomas, and they're going to play all 3 of them like they did last week. So who do they have as the most like complete pass catcher? It's Adam Thielen. So I really hope he comes back coming off of an extended absence. I don't think his ownership is going to get any, it's not going to get juiced up. So, and his price is in like the mid 4s, I think. Let me check what it is. Yeah, 4,700. So I kind of hope that we see Adam Thielen like a late, it'll have to come Saturday at the latest, a late activation from IR.
Right. I can tell you just right now, 3 minutes ago, Mike K reported he was not practicing today.
No, so he went limited in DNP. Yeah, it's probably not good. Yeah, Jalen Coker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
But maybe it was just like you said, we'll see something. We'll know Saturday though.
Yeah. I also think in the same discussion, the Saints have allowed the most yards before contact per attempt this season at 2.85 yards. That's massive. That's a lot of yards before contact. And we have a lot of uncertainty with the Carolina run game. Do you have any updates on Jonathan Brooks?
I didn't peek at him to see because I know he logged the full practice at some point this week, but I didn't know if they were going to activate him.
Yeah.
The Saints are interesting to me from a top-down perspective because they have this really weird stretch of the season where they had a bunch of injuries and they played 3 games in 10 days. And that's when they got smoked. I talked about this a little bit last week on another show about chasing J.K. Dobbins, and I was a little bit worried about it because I wanted to see how the Saints defense actually looked with like outside of that stretch. And they were largely like competent last week, and they just couldn't score points. And eventually the offense like killed the defense. Right. So I'm still like hesitant. I don't know what we have with the Saints defense. I'm still waiting for like more clarity on like how bad. I don't know if they're as bad as that 3-game stretch, basically, is what I'm saying.
The counterpoint to that in my mind is that the Panthers have been legitimately a strong run offense. They've been legitimately good in run blocking. And if
they spent all the money on those guards,
I know exactly, like they better be, right. But if Jonathan Brooks is activated, I think, which I think he's going to be after consecutive full practices, if he's activated, I kind of get this feeling that like the field is going to be like, oh, let's play this promising rookie. When the fact of the matter is, he's probably going to be eased in,
Oh yeah.
and his snaps are probably going to come at the expense of Miles Sanders and not Chuba Hubbard. So if Chuba is going to be extremely low owned in this spot at 6,500, I think there's a lot of merit to that, and I think you can play him with Alvin Kamara even. Any thoughts on that on Chuba?
Yeah, I just one of those things, like you said, if you can eye hole it and like you get like the run out where it still is Hubbard with 65 to 75% of the backfield touches, and he's getting the goal line carries. That's the one area where you just have to say if Brooks is available, do they give him a goal line carry, right? Like, do we
Yeah.
know? So that's why I said like just nailing it, like just keyholing it.
This is an interesting question. And my initial response from a theoretical lens is probably no, because what you're playing Hill for is touchdown poacher. And that directly will take away from the upside of Alvin Kamara. And at his price, you're going to need like pass game roll, but you're going to need the touchdown. So I wouldn't. That would be more of
Mhm.
a like small fieldy type play. For GPPs, I would not go there. Anything else to add on that game? And then you can take us to the next game environment
No,
you want
no,
to
but
talk
yeah, I
about.
mean that one offers just some of the cheaper pieces. We're back to another week where it's a little tighter. And
Oh yeah.
how can we get to some of the guys that we really clearly want to play that are high priced? The other game that I think offers maybe that potential avenue is the Giants and Commanders.
Hmm.
Obviously, I think that game is stackable anyways with some minis that are good, in that, obviously if you want to pay up from Malik Neighbors, you can, but Tyrone Tracy looks like he's going to clear protocol. And he's going to be available coming off of another dominant showing on Monday night. So we're getting the Monday night pricing put in for
Hmm.
Tyrone Tracy. He completely dominated snaps against Devin Singletary. So if he's going to be on the board, because I've been talking about the Commanders' defense for a couple weeks now, and was trying to tell people about this pass rush and not
Yeah,
chasing like in
it's
they
good.
yeah, they can rush the passer, and without Andrew Thomas, they're gonna I think they're gonna continue to rush the passer. But the one thing that's held true, it's weird because they're a great pass rushing defensive front, and they've been taking advantage of some of these matchups, but like they're still giving up a ton of explosives in the run game. And we
Yeah.
saw that again with DeAndre Swift. So if Tyrone Tracy is available, he definitely is a guy when you look at the workload he's had. It's interesting that he hasn't been involved as the pass catcher because they keep using Wan'Dale Robinson as that role. I mean, the
Yeah.
way Rondell Robinson's targets are probably the most criminal thing that are happening in the NFL this season that nobody cares about. This guy's averaging 7 yards per, like under 7 yards per catch, and has like a 30% target share. He's like fourth in
Yeah.
the NFL in targets per game. This is criminal. This is like someone should be jailed for this. Like absolutely, like put in jail for this. But those should be going to Tyrone Tracy, some of those, and see what we can get,
Right.
or just to Darius Slayton, like they did on Monday night, like throw the ball at
Yeah.
Darius Slayton. But yeah, Tyrone Tracy is definitely a guy I think that opens some things up. And then you have kind of either you want to play Brian Robinson, you can, but Terry McLaurin is another guy because of where he's priced, I think can perpetually gets overlooked. But this is a pretty tremendous spot for him this week. So if you remember, if you go back to week 2 and these teams played, Terry McLaurin had a 3.9 ADOT, and Cliff Kingsbury came out after the game and was like, we're not doing a good enough job of using Terry McLaurin correctly.
Yeah.
Since that matchup, 16.8 air yards per target. Nobody with as many targets as Terry McLaurin has a higher ADOT. Giants also 24th in points per game allowed to opposing wide receiver ones. But here's the kicker. On throws 20 more yards downfield, which is where Terry McLaurin's been living on these moon balls, Giants have allowed a 72% catch rate to wide receivers. The league average is 35%. Like they're absolutely getting smoked. And you brought this up, I think, a couple weeks ago when they played the Eagles, that when they do go to man coverage, like they don't play like a lot of man coverage, just like like
Hmm.
25% of the time. But when the Giants do play man coverage, they give up big plays. And you saw that again on Monday night when Pickens got the money ball
Yeah.
on them. And that's like the Terry McLaurin window is open for him to have one of these. Get one in the end zone, Terry. Has any player caught more like 50-yard air yard passes this year and got tackled from behind than Terry McLaurin?
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has. He had another one last week on that 60-yarder.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what the struggles in the Giants with the deep ball has been their secondary is just not performing. I mean, Cordell Flott has been injured; he's likely to be out again. And the team benched Deontay Banks,
Deontay
a
Banks, yeah.
former 2023 first round pick. They straight up benched him against the Steelers. So yeah, that is very interesting. I don't. It's really tough for me to see volume in this spot, but you're not playing Terry McLaurin for the volume. You're playing him for those deep passes. So you're going to need him to connect on multiple downfield stuff. I think that's very well within a reasonable expectation here, though. And Tyrone Tracy, man, we talk about like how tight pricing is. Tyrone Tracy, for the role that he has had, is at least 1,200 too cheap on DraftKings. And that's assuming that he is like the new lead back in New York. But we've seen this coaching staff prefer to use like a kind of, or not a workhorse. I don't want to throw that around willy nilly, but
Yeah, they
like
basically
a
just
clear
traded
lead back.
usage, though.
Yeah.
If you look at the way Singletary was used the first month of the season and then Tyrone Tracy since, it's just basically flipped.
Yep. And the Washington ground game, like as you mentioned, has been one of the easier units to attack. They're allowing the second most yards before contact per attempt, 2.66 this season. On the other side, the Giants are allowing the third most. So this could be. That's where I said the pass game volume is probably
Yeah.
not going to be there this week. So I think Tyron Tracy, I mean, I think 5,500. He opens up a lot on the roster. Anything else to add from this spot?
No, not pretty much. I mean, if you want to keep doing the Zach Ertz, like he'll get you 11 points. He's going to get you 11 points.
No, thanks. I want some upside, baby. Give me some upside. Dude, I want to talk. Here's my gross one. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Let's talk Patriots Titans real quick. The Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson, and I'll start it here. Ramondre Stevenson in weeks 1, 2, and 8, and that sounds random, but in weeks 1, 2, and 8, why do I bring those games up? Because they beat Cincinnati 16-10 in week 1. They played Seattle to a 20-23 loss in week 2, and they beat the Jets 25-22 in week 8. So these are the only 3 games that have been truly competitive from the Patriots. I mean, they played Miami tough 10-15, but they really were never able to get anything going offensively. But if you look at weeks 1, 2, and 8, and even if we want to include Miami game, Ramondre Stevenson has touch or opportunity totals of 28 in week 1 against the
Mm-hmm.
Bengals, 26 in week 2 against Seattle, and 23 in week 8 against the Jets. But in order for that to kind of come to fruition, the Patriots have to remain in the game. So now it brings in, does Drake May play after coming off a concussion? He got in a limited practice yesterday. Have not seen an update yet on his status today. But the fact
Yeah,
that he
they
was
said
limited,
that he still has a chance to play. He did another limited today.
okay. So he's asymptomatic, and he needs to basically be cleared for contact at this point and be cleared by an independent neurologist based on the concussion protocol steps. If that happens, I think the Patriots have a much better chance of remaining competitive in this game because Drake May and his escapability in the pocket, his pocket presence and his escapability has meant that this offense can sustain drives at a heftier rate. He's also thrown 5 touchdowns in his 2 full games this season compared to, like, how many does Jacoby Brissett have this season? Like less than that for sure. He has 2 touchdowns. It's fantastic. Yeah, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's going well.
Yeah, so and the reason I bring that up is the Titans have been a team where they are very, very difficult to pass on. They are top 5 in completion rate allowed. They're first in the league in pass yards allowed per game. So if the Patriots are going to find offensive success here, it's probably coming through Ramondre. We look at the Titans team, they're allowing 2.15 yards before contact per attempt, and the Patriots are not creating yards before contact. So Ramondre's had to do a lot of the heavy lifting on his own. But this is a better than average matchup on the ground. Thoughts on that before we continue?
No, I mean, I think just your opening statement was the kind of the linchpin in these competitive games. We've seen Ramondre Stevenson, even in the Dolphins game, which was, like I said, just not a blowout. They've got 2 wins and losses by 3 and 5 points. And in those games, he's been the RB7, the RB12, the RB4, and the RB5. And then they have 4 weeks where they've lost 21 points, 17 points, 16 points with Ramondre active because he was inactive one of the other weeks. And in those games, he's been the RB80, the RB38, and the RB44. So it's like pretty clear cut. Like when they're competitive game scripts, they're giving him the football a ton. And that's what we're looking at here from a top-down perspective. I think it's really as clear as that. That's what you're playing for.
Now, the Patriots' chances of being competitive in the spot also take a leap should Will Levis return.
Yeah.
We want some mistakes, bro. And honestly, like
Yep.
we haven't seen the mistakes as frequently. We did see one last week. Oh God, it was a weird play, but like it was supposed to be a screen option and it wasn't there. And we had pressure in the face of Rudolph, and he like freaked out and just tried to still throw the screen, and it was picked off real quick. So we've still seen like the mistakes, but not at the level of Will Levis. So in my eyes, it opens up if Will Levis returns. This Patriots defense has not been like great by any measure. Like they have been bad, legitimately bad, like bottom 5 in EPA per attempt or for per play allowed, bottom 5 in drive success rate allowed, all these things pointing to like this team has not been good. But if Will Levis comes back, another way for the Patriots to be competitive is if their defense kind of generates some sort of disruption, turnover, sacks. Will Levis create mistakes. So I like the prospect of pairing Ramondre with the Patriots defense. There were some interesting things. I don't think you need to bring back from there.
No.
But I mean, Nick Westbrook-Akine has scored in 3 straight, and he's he got up to a season high in snap rate and route participation last week. And he finally started working downfield, caught like a 35-yarder, 34-yarder, something like that. How do you feel about that? And then would you like look to any of these Tennessee Titans pass catchers in that instance?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's necessary a spot. I think I would, if I was going to use Ramondre, it'd just be like as a oneer, and not really try to chase it. But I think if you do, I mean, you could talk yourself into squint to see it for either, Ridley having, because we know the targets at least are going to be there. The quality of target remains to be seen,
Yeah.
how volatile it is, but we know that he's going to get the targets. And the Patriots, for as much as everyone talks about Christian Gonzalez, like they've gotten absolutely flooded by wide receiver ones pretty regularly this season and outside wide receivers. So we know the air yards and the target's going to be there. And anytime you have that guy, I actually kind of kicked myself for not being on Calvin Ridley a little bit last week. So even in the worksheet, I wrote up the spot as being like, I just kind of dismissed it based on what we had gotten through the season. But even in the spot, I was like, well, Hopkins is gone. The Lions have given up to this. Like if you're still using him as like a flex, then I'm like, well, why didn't I play him in DFS?
Yeah.
Why? Like what else? Like, it was there. It was there for the taking. And now I feel like it's a week too late. But the targets in the yard, the targets in the air yards are going to be there.
And I was going to say, like, I was not on him as well because he was running almost like 70% of his routes were goes. And like,
yeah, it did change a little bit last week, to be fair.
That's what I'm saying. His structure in the offense changed last week. He was running more flats, he was running more outs, he was running more slants, he was running like intermediate, get the ball in his hands type stuff. Which is kind of what we want.
We've seen a few of those guys change last week. Well, we talked about Kyle Pitts in like the last month. So hopefully there's been some self-scouting, with the Titans and Ridley. And then we saw it with Marvin Harrison Jr. last week too. Apparently Kyler got with Marvin Harrison Jr. during the week last week, and they did like a session of what types of routes Marvin Harrison Jr. wanted to start running. And we saw him have a season low rate of go routes. Marvin Harrison Jr. ran his highest slot rate, his highest rate of crossing routes, and his highest rate of routes in between the numbers than he did all of the season so far. So hopefully we see some self-scouting. We assume this stuff happens more than it really does, but those are a couple of spots that we talked about where hopefully there was some religion had.
Yes. Yeah. So that actually, like, it makes me like Ramondre with Calvin Ridley a little bit more. because I mean the combined price you're
Just
paying
like a
about
mini.
12K. Yeah, just a little mini action there. All right, man. We're getting to the end here. This is about the time every week where we get the gross out the door type stuff. So hit me with some out the door stuff that you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about the cheapy guys that we talked about earlier in the show. Just a couple other guys, and just kind of keeping the pulse on this week is still Cortland Sutton. I played him last week. It's just the volume should be there on the road.
Yeah.
His price and opportunities just still doesn't align because he is a volatile player. And again, like Calvin Ridley, like there's just been weeks where the targets haven't mattered. So that still exists, but I expect a lot of passing volume here. The Ravens, even with them getting Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey back this week, when those guys have been on the field, they've given up some spike weeks. So he's just another guy I'm still monitoring. Because in that price range of wide receiver this week, when you think about the guys that are tracking to be popular now, and we do the show on Friday afternoon, things definitely change over the weekend. But when I see guys like Ladd McConkey and Jacoby Myers, like in that price range of some of the highest owned guys, those are still guys that I know have to get there largely through volume and
Yeah.
potentially don't have the highest individual ceilings. And I'm like, all right, well, who are the types of guys that can combat these guys in that same price range? And you brought up Calvin Ridley being one. Cortland Sutton is one of those guys, right? Like we're guys that can turn that can turn just a 4 to 6 target game into something that those guys need to do in 8 to 12 targets, right? So I'm kind of looking at like some of those more volatile guys in that price range to combat some of the guys that typically would be more of like cash game type plays for like in a regular week, but
Yeah.
because of pricing this week, they're getting kind of pushed into lineups heavily. So yeah, I mean, it could be the death of me to just say, like, yeah, I'm not going to play Ladd McConkey and Jacoby Myers, and I'm going to play Cortland Sutton and Calvin Ridley. But I do kind of prefer those guys at the same price range when we're talking about those other two guys being potentially owned to the levels that they're tracking right now.
Yeah. Also, I'll go. We're talking about Ladd McConkey. I'll go to their opponent for one of my kind of off the border, off the radar type plays. And it's not Cedric Tillman. It's actually Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is priced at what, 4,200? I think. Yeah, 4,200. And we talked about like changing roles in offenses. His structure in this offense changed in week 8. He had a 9.6 ADOT. He led the team in first read target rate at 29.4%. He saw 2.66 yards per route run. Excuse me. And he managed a solid 0.52 fantasy points per route run. Obviously, like Cedric Tillman led the team in that metric because he scored twice. Excuse me. But Elijah Moore's role actually like changed to a higher emphasis in this offense. It's like not only now is Jerry Jeudy behind like David Njoku and Cedric Tillman, but he's probably behind Elijah Moore in this offense as well. It's the RIP Judy, man. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, the Browns are a little bit tougher to diagnose because we only are working with the 1 week sample and like the 1 week and 1 drive with Jameis Winston. And we talked about some injuries the Ravens had last week. Is there some oscillation there? The Chargers are a heavy zone based team though. So I do expect it to be more like Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman again, just based on what the structure of the Chargers do. Also, I mean, the Chargers in general, like they're a team that are just really tough to gauge, because when you look at like the little numbers next to everybody's names, like you'll see like the Chargers don't give up a lot of points to players, right? But then you like the Chargers to this point have faced Gardner Minshew, Bryce Young, Justin Fields, Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Spencer Rattler, and Patrick Mahomes. Like these are
Yeah.
not the offenses that are like really been explosive so far this season. So I mean, is this what truism do we know about the Chargers defense? I would contend we don't know if they're any good or not. Largely. And I do believe that also they should get some credit for not allowing those teams to torch them. Like allowing bad players to beat you should count
Yeah.
for something too. But also like they're from a, like there still is an opportunity here where they just could not be as good either. So that's a game too where I look at that low total and I'm like, there are paths for that game to go over for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think it definitely sets up more for Moore and Tillman again this week. And Njoku has pretty wide man zone splits where it's been more man coverage stuff has been
Yeah.
more of a signal for him. So I do lean more to more towards Tillman and Moore.
And David Njoku was added to the injury report as a DNP on Thursday after not being on the injury report on Wednesday. He was added with both ankle and hand injuries. And that's very interesting to me because of the ankle issues that he started the season with. So yeah, I don't know. Like if Njoku is out, that probably boosts Elijah Moore's kind of over the middle of the field possession-y type role as well. And Njoku was running a lot of seam stuff, which Elijah Moore ran a lot of last week as well in that kind of new structure of his route tree. So that's my gross off the border, off the wall one. Elijah Moore at 4,200 here. Do you have anything else that is kind of
I mean,
off?
the only thing else I will say is we're tracking to have a slate where the Bills and Dolphins have, just that 49-point game total, and only one player is even tracking for any like noteworthy ownership, and it's Devin
Which is who?
Achane.
Okay.
Yeah, like Devin Achane's like the only one getting any steam, and I know like that. So we know the path for this game to fail. Like McDermott has been in the bag against Tua and Mike McDaniel.
Yeah.
But also, if we're going to have a slate where just like Josh Allen, Tyreek Hill, and James Cook, who I believe is in a really good spot, are all going to be single digit owned. I mean, I feel like when you're entering some of the stuff, like I like to look for, like, single entry, like sub 5K entrance. Like if you get the game right, like because you can build a team with Allen, Tyreek, Achane, and James Cook, and still play Alvin Kamara, and still play whoever Browns wide receiver you want. So like, if they're just not going to be that popular, I'm at least going to make a lineup with those guys, and that in those settings, not large field, but those small field single entries, like just because of the ownership, and just hope we get there.
The final like out the door comment we'll make, quick discussion, is on the Rams. This is an afternoon game with a solid game total with a close spread. And if Puka Nacua, who popped on the injury report again on Thursday with an aggravation of his knee, whatever PCL that was going on there, if he's healthy and active, he is way too cheap at 7,200. And if he is out, Cooper Kupp is way too cheap at 77. So yeah, that's a wait and see. But man, if this offense is down to just Cooper Kupp and the freaking running back, dude, Kyron Williams, yeah, dude. Oh my god, I'm so tired after last night. Anyway, if the offense is down to just Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams, it'll be very hard for me to not play one of those two guys on every roster as well. In this spot, based on how the structure of this offense is, I would want probably one of the two on every roster, potentially playing them together type range here. So keep an eye on Puka's status heading into the weekend. And that's going to do it for week 9, y'all. We have continued to crush on the show. We keep sniffing these binks. Dude, one of us is going to bink in short order.
It's been close. We've been close, man. I think since from week 3 on, we've been dancing around the table. One of us, hopefully. And like I said, I've always been a better player the back half of the year, so it's been nice to have early season success.
Yeah, but as we enter the back 9, man, it is time. It is game time. So until next week, y'all, he is Rich. I am Hilow. Head on over to oneweekseason.com, get signed up for Inner Circle, get access to all the leverage and theory discussions that we have over there. Head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Use code TAKE25. That bad boy will get you 25% off anything on the site, including everything that Rich contributes to over there. So until next time, y'all, we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards, and may your trick-or-treating bags be plentiful. Peace.
1 week season.